The big bombshell news of the day on Wednesday, which was trending on social media all day long, was a report from Sean Ross Sapp on Fightful Select that CM Punk, who has not wrestled a match since walking out of WWE the day after the Royal Rumble in 2014, is considering an in-ring comeback. And AEW appears to be his most likely landing spot at this point, although nothing is actually signed yet or official. But according to this report from Fightful, Sean Ross Sapp reports that CM Punk has been considering a comeback to pro wrestling with AEW as the front runner. And the report said that Punk and a company official, quote, have had ongoing conversations about an in-ring return. And they added that we have been told in recent days that higher-ups in WWE believe that Punk is headed to AEW, and that while other companies have had interest, they had not heard of any formal offers. It is important to remember that talks are very different than actually putting pen to paper and signing a contract. There was interest in Punk, if you recall, in the early days of AEW. And discussions were, well, I don't know if it's discussions or text messages so much, but the Bucks have talked about it. Cody Rhodes has talked about it. I think Tony Khan may have talked as well. And even CM Punk, who took some, passive-aggressive digs at the way that AEW handle things. And, talking about how if you want to negotiate, you negotiate the right way. You don't negotiate by proxy or by text message. And it actually seemed like there might have been some bad blood there. There might have been a little bit of animosity on one or both sides. And it looked actually very unlikely that Punk would ever do business with AEW. Outside of a couple of indie appearances over the years under a mask, and those weren't in matches, those were just, appearances, run-ins, Punk has not had anything to do with pro wrestling for the past 7 years, outside of his stint as an analyst on the WWE Backstage show on FS1, which didn't last long. That was, I think they had high expectations and hopes for what he might be able to bring to the table. It almost seemed like he wasn't even on enough. He wasn't on every week. He'd be on every now and then. But that show ended up being a flop. Punk has not had anything to do with wrestling outside of that. It did seem like he was perfectly content to walk away and never come back. But never is a long time. And it is not hard to get that itch. When you have somebody like CM Punk, who was as big of a wrestling fan as he was, came up on the independent scene, had to scratch and claw to get to where he was. And, it's been documented that even in WWE, when he initially was in, he almost got cut. He had a lot of people who did not like him, who were working against him, who didn't see anything in him in WWE. And it was Shawn Michaels, of all people, who was in a backstage meeting and spoke up in his defense. This is back when he was on the ECW brand, or maybe just before that. So even when he made it to WWE, there was still resistance that he was met by. And it was an uphill climb for him because there were people in that company who were not fans of his, who looked at him and didn't see what the big deal was. They saw this tattooed guy, not very physically big or imposing. Maybe there was a perception about his attitude, whether that was accurate or not. He had a lot of things working against him. But he got through it and went on to become one of the biggest stars in the company over the past decade. Decade plus. Now, I don't know what his financial status is. I don't know if he needs the money or not. He doesn't seem like somebody who lives beyond his means. But, he loved wrestling so much. It was only natural that he would want to come back to it for at least one last run before he ages out. Whatever that even means in wrestling. We got 62-year-old Sting on AEW television still taking bumps. Right? 54-year-old Bill Goldberg just walked back into Monday Night Raw. He's getting a championship match, most likely at SummerSlam. So CM Punk is 42. He's practically a baby by comparison. The guy's in fucking diapers compared to some of these other people. But when you take a step back and you look at the wrestling landscape, all the free agent names that are out there, it's really two names, right? It was three until Samoa Joe re-signed with NXT. And that kind of had me excited there because you saw those three names. You saw Punk, Bryan, and Joe, who, after Joe got fired earlier in the year, for the first time in their careers, for the first time in a very long time, those three names potentially becoming free agents all at the same time. I even said, you could probably have headlined a major independent event if they didn't want to immediately go sign with another company. Those three names were big enough names, at least to the really hardcore wrestling demographic. You could have had an all-in type show that you could have built around those three being on the card or being in the main event. And then Joe went and he re-signed with NXT. So that leaves really two names who I think could really be a difference maker for a promoter. And one of those names is CM Punk. Despite how long he's been gone for, and I know people have kind of soured on him in some cases or tired of all the CM Punk talk or they don't see what the big deal is, I'm not even talking about it so much in the ring. In the ring, Punk at 36, let alone 42, couldn't hold a candle to some of the things that we see in the ring from guys in AEW like Darby Allin, Sammy Guevara, Jungle Boy, Rey Fenix, others that they have on that roster. Physically in the ring, he's not a flashy guy. It's not so much his matches, although he's had some great matches that really makes him stand out. He's got that intangible quality about him. He's got a presence about him and a reputation that people remember him as being a big star. For that time period, for that era in which he was featured, he was a big name. His real value and his real money is with his mouth. It's on the microphone that you put in his hand. And he had the ability, potentially still has, but had the ability to talk people into their seats. And if he can still do that, after 7 years away, if he can still deliver on that, then I think he can be a very valuable asset to AEW. Now, he didn't mean squat, as it turned out, when it came to WWE Backstage, ratings-wise. But the people who wanted to see CM Punk return, let's be honest, they didn't want to see him return on a talk show. They didn't want to see him return sitting next to fucking Booker T and Renee Young, analyzing shitty Raw and SmackDown storylines. They wanted him back in the ring. They wanted him back in the arena in front of a crowd with a mic in his hand, cutting promos on people. And as uneventful as that backstage run was, nobody is going to remember it if he walks out on television one of these weeks to Cult of Personality. Nobody is going to be thinking, oh man, this would have been a much bigger moment were it not for that little run he had on FS1 in front of 90,000 people each week. Now, the one other issue with Punk that I think is very interesting, and I do wonder if this is part of the conversations, if he is having conversations with them, that has to be worked out in advance, and that is the fact that AEW employs Colt Cabana. Now, Cabana and Punk used to be very good friends. They were very close. Of course, Punk went on Cabana's podcast after he walked out on WWE later that year and did the big tell-all, and it led to a lawsuit, a lot of legal issues, a lot of legal bills, and things went sideways between the two of them. And Punk has actually had some pretty harsh comments about Cabana. That stuff would probably have to be resolved in advance because that can make for a very awkward situation for a company that, people talk about how harmonious the locker room is and all of that sort of thing. That's something that has to be squashed, I think. I mean, not that both guys can't be professional, they can't coexist in the same place, but that is going to be very interesting. Whether or not they can either make up, put the past behind them, or at least, coexist in the same place without it feeling too awkward. So I don't know how much of an issue the Cabana thing is in these talks that they may be having, but that's something that I would be very curious to find out if that plays into things at all. And if there are conversations, if there is sort of this coming together kind of moment where they're trying to broker a peace between the two, or is it just not that big of a deal? And they each kind of keep to themselves and do their own thing. I do think if they can get a deal done, that All Out in Chicago is the natural place for him to show up. In the closing moments of the show, after the main event if Omega were to retain. Because there is always the possibility that Hangman Page may not win the AEW World Championship in Chicago if they do that first match with him and Omega at All Out. It could be part of a longer story that builds to Full Gear, or builds to months down the road where Hangman ultimately wins the title. It kind of came out of nowhere a few weeks ago where they brought these two back together. It almost does, because All Out is not that far off. It almost does feel like maybe they're, I don't know if rushing is the right word, but if they wanted to extend this out by a few months, they certainly could do so. As long as in the end, Hangman is the one to take that title. I do believe it should be him. The story is just built perfectly for him to be the one to take that championship from Kenny Omega. Whether it's September, October, November, December, January, it doesn't matter. Even Revolution in February. That person should be Hangman Page. But it's also possible that, they go to All Out and he doesn't win. And Kenny Omega retains. Right? And then maybe you have Punk walk out. Doesn't mean he's going to immediately challenge for the title. I'm not saying that. But he makes a huge splash. Doesn't have to say a word. In Chicago, he doesn't have to say a word. And you save the first big promo for Dynamite that week and try to pop a big number. Not unlike what WWE did this week with John Cena at Money in the Bank. This great surprise cameo at the end of the show. The place goes nuts for him when he comes out to confront Roman Reigns. He doesn't say a word. He never touched a microphone. And you'll notice, even though his issue is with Roman Reigns, who is the SmackDown champion, they were very quick to announce that John Cena would be opening Monday Night Raw this week. A pure ratings grab. I don't blame them. I would have done the same thing. But his issue is not with anybody on Raw. His issue is with Roman Reigns. But they were very sure to make sure that their audience knew that, hey, 8 p.m., be there. John Cena is going to be on TV and he's going to have something to say. You could do the same thing with CM Punk at All Out. And with Hangman, he has this friendship and this alliance with the Dark Order. The Dark Order may be his friends, but all due respect to the Dark Order, he can use some better friends. It is possible, we get to a point where the Dark Order just isn't enough. Maybe the elite, the numbers are too much. Maybe they lock him in a fucking dressing room or something. They can't come out to help out Hangman Page. He's being overwhelmed. He needs some new friends. I can think of 2 names that Hangman could enlist. Or who on their own could just kind of come to his aid. As friends. To help even the odds heading into the fall. Punk would be one of those names. And the other name, which is the other big story, because Punk is not the only big story tied to AEW this week. The other big name is Bryan Danielson. It looks like he really is done with WWE, and I'll say I'm surprised by that, because I thought even at the 11th hour they would be able to work out a deal to keep him. He is somebody who has been with the company for a very long time. He does have name value. He is well liked. And he is somebody who I didn't think they would want to let go of and would want to lose. And they would go out of their way to accommodate him and give him whatever it was that he wanted. Remember the talk months ago about how he wanted to work in Japan and have the freedom maybe to work other independent dates? And Nick Khan was having at least initial conversations with New Japan Pro Wrestling. I assume that they were not able to work something out. I was surprised they would even engage with them in the first place. WWE is very isolationist in the way that they operate. They don't play well with others. Internally, his name is not even being mentioned as far as the internal roster. PW Insider had a report that said for merchandise that would have to be planned out months in advance. His name is not on anything. He's not included in any of those plans. But he really does want to be able to work dates in Japan. And it's just not something that WWE does. It's not something that WWE has ever been receptive to, or else, I'm sure there's a lot of people who would love the same kind of accommodations. But the drumbeat got louder on Wednesday with a report from Cassidy Haynes of Bodyslam.net, who is said to have some strong contacts in AEW. I saw Sean Rossap mention that and sort of endorse his credentials. Bodyslam.net has broken some stories before. He had a report posted that actually took the site down, claiming that Bryan is 100% locked in and already signed to an AEW contract, one that reportedly allows him to work dates in Japan and gives him creative input into his character. And the story got so much traction on Wednesday evening, it crashed bodyslam.net. The website was still down as of about an hour before Dynamite ended when I checked on Wednesday night. So all this stuff kind of breaking at the same time is creating this groundswell of just buzz around AEW. A lot of people getting their hopes up that it's true. At this point, I would be very surprised if this didn't pan out on both fronts, but at least on one. Either Punk or Bryan, it seems at least one of them is very likely in the very near future to wind up in AEW. Again, I would save Punk for All Out. I would save Bryan's debut as a surprise for that first New York City show a few weeks later at Arthur Ashe Stadium. That is going to be the highest attended show in AEW history. Over 16,000 people so far. They're opening up new sections, it looks like, every week. So by the time we get to the show in September, it could very well be close to 20,000 people that they will have in that building, which just completely blows away their biggest audience by probably almost 10,000. Now imagine Final Countdown playing and Bryan walking out, the reaction that he would get. Hangman, side by side with Punk and Bryan, would be a great rub for Adam Page. Probably some humor, too, if we're being honest, right? Him partnering up with the resident drunk and Adam Page partnering up on the roster here with two guys who don't drink a sip of beer. But it's a way to introduce two huge names without immediately having to thrust them into championship contention and overshadow a good thing that they have going with Hangman Page. You know, I mentioned Cult of Personality a few minutes ago. I know that would get the bigger reaction, and I'm sure Tony Khan, if they get Punk, I'm sure he would work to secure the rights to the song like he's done with Jon Moxley and Jungle Boy. But I would love to hear that Miseria Cantare song one more time from the ROH day, just for old time's sake. And the AEW audience, they would know. They would know. The Cult of Personality thing is more mainstream WWE fans who have come to associate Punk with that song, who didn't even know that he used that before he came to WWE. Yeah, that'll get the bigger reaction, but I would love to hear him come out to that song at least one more time. But that's where things stand right now. There is a lot of smoke to these fires. Again, at this point, I would be very surprised if at least one of them did not sign and end up in AEW, but it looks like Tony Khan might be able to pull off a huge coup and bring two huge names into the company. And if you put me on the spot and said, who do I think would be the bigger signing? If they were able to get both of them, at least initially, the bigger signing, honestly, I think would be Bryan. Because Bryan is coming off of WWE television. Bryan has been far more active in wrestling than Punk has been over the last several years. Even if you factor in the time off when he retired, Bryan was just in the WrestleMania main event this year. Bryan walking out, almost right off WWE television, I mean, not immediately, but that to me would have, going forward in the initial weeks and months, I think, and knowing what he can deliver in the ring. Punk may be a better promo, but I think Bryan would probably have a little more impact. But the initial shock of seeing CM Punk, obviously that would create a bigger initial reaction. But if you can get both of them together, debuting within a few weeks of each other, and you have some of your biggest shows in the history of your company coming up, including that show in New York City, this really feels like a turning point moment for AEW. If they play things right, and if they can put things together exactly the way that they need to put things together and debut them just at the right time, you're back on the road in front of these big, hot crowds, it really could be a turning point moment for this company. I'm not going to sit here and tell you they're going to overcome Raw and SmackDown. It has nothing to do with Raw and SmackDown. This could elevate this company to that next level by bringing these two guys in, given what they can contribute and given the name value that they still have. Even Punk. Again, after 7 years away, the guy still has a name Why not tap into that and take advantage of that? He has his fans. Whether or not you may be one of them or not, he has his fans. And how many times over the years has Punk's name been dangled and it sends the internet into a tizzy? If you don't think AEW snatching up CM Punk wouldn't still be a big deal, then you're just not paying attention. These would be the two biggest free agent signings in the history of this company. And it could not come at a better time for them, for all the reasons I just mentioned, but also don't forget they have a new show debuting next month called Rampage. So the timing for Tony Khan and AEW is very advantageous if they can pull this off. This would be a huge coup for that company, without question. And I say all of that without even drawing attention to the fact that Bryan Danielson could very well be working matches in New Japan. Could very well be working matches in the Tokyo Dome as part of whatever deal he signs with AEW. Or as time goes on, if we start to see more New Japan talents come in and do matches on AEW television, they could be working against Bryan, which is a pretty exciting element. And again, something that I know he has talked about wanting to do now for a number of years. So it opens up the potential for all sorts of dream matches that, we never thought would be possible. So it's a pretty exciting proposition, and one of the reasons why, when I compare the two of them, while both of them would be big, to me personally, the Bryan signing, if that were to happen, or if it's already happened, is potentially the bigger deal. And the one that, frankly, I might be a little more excited about, because of all the different possibilities that it brings. But, even somebody like Punk, imagining him in AEW feuding, even just having a mic battle with somebody like an MJF, who has to move away from Chris Jericho at some point, right? At some point, that feud has to end. MJF has to move on. But imagine Punk and MJF. I mean, you could rattle off a whole list of names of people that these two guys have never worked with before. It opens up all of these fresh matches that you can do. So if you're an AEW fan, even if you're of the mindset, oh man, I really don't like all these WWE people coming in, let me tell you something. You have two free agents who are available, who are open to coming into your company, like CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, and you don't try to make a move for them, then you're doing something wrong. If you have the opportunity to bring two people with names like the two of them have into the fold, you take it. You take that opportunity because you can make a lot of money off these guys. Put them in your video game, you can market them, you can merchandise them. It goes far beyond just the fantasy matches that people are envisioning in their heads. You would be a fool not to grab one or both of these guys if you had the chance. And it looks like AEW, if they haven't already, is on their way to doing just that.